I'm Carol and this is Over 50 So What? No matter what happens, the sun still rises in the morning. And that's how an optimist thinks. So today we're going to learn some tips on how to be more optimistic with the guru himself, Victor Perton from the Centre for Optimism. Now, if the weather's a bit chilly while you're watching this today, a great way to keep warm is to move. So get on your feet and join in the 5-minute fitness segment. Now, lastly, you're going to have to stay to the end of the show because, shock, horror, I confess, I know nothing about footy or AFL. And I've been thrown in the deep end with a new program called Quick Kick, which is designed for mature women to get into footy. Who would have thought that I'd be kicking a football after all these years? Have you ever noticed how some people seem to be grumbling and complaining all the time, whereas other people seem upbeat, bright and perky? Have you ever wondered what is the secret to looking on the bright side of life? Well, today we chat with Victor Perton, the Chief Optimism Officer from the Centre for Optimism. Hi Victor, welcome to Over 50 So What? Very happy to see you on the show.
Carol, it is an absolute delight. But I love what you're doing here. You're uplifting the community, you're uplifting people, you're doing a fabulous job. So it's a great honour to join you this morning.
So what is optimism? As you're the Chief Optimism Officer, tell us, what is it?
It's a really good question. In fact, the oldest way it is phrased, I love, is from a English mystic called Mother Julian of Norwich, who lived 700 years ago during the Black Plague. And in her book, she has this wonderful phrase, all shall be well, all shall be well, all manner of thing shall be well. So it's this notion of looking forward. Everything doesn't need to be okay now, but things will work out. And had she lived 700 years, Carol, she could have written the Harvard Medical School definition of optimism, which is a belief that good things will happen and that things will work out in the end. And the last little bit I'll give, those of your viewers who are Deakin graduates, Deakin University has a professor of molecular psychiatry, Professor G. And when I asked her what makes her optimistic, she said, optimism is the evidence of dreams not yet realized. So it doesn't matter what age you are, optimism is that evidence of the dreams you have that haven't been realized. And one of the interviews I did was with a leadership guru who was 88. And he said to me, Victor, I'm optimistic because my best days are still ahead of me.
Yes, we interviewed a wonderful lady, 70-year-old entrepreneur, and her saying was, what you just mentioned there, it will work out in the end.
And that's what entrepreneurship's about. You know, it's about persistence, it's optimism, it's giving it a go.
Now, you've set up this thing called the Centre for Optimism because you have a saying about the fog of pessimism. Can you explain how this all happened?
Yeah, sure. So because you've mainly got an Australian audience, I can share. So I spent several years in the United States, living in Silicon Valley, but with an office in New York, to sell the idea of foreign direct investment in Australia and to support Australian exporters. Everywhere I went in America, there was this stereotype of Australians as the relentless optimists. And it opened doors. You know, every project we did was faster and speedier because people had this incredible stereotype of the Australian. And then I worked for Joe Hockey and Tony Abbott on the G20 presidency. Exactly the same, this complete trust in us. And then I came back to Melbourne and I was astonished by the negativity of language. And so a bit like you, rather than complain about the complainers and try and tell them they're wrong, we did a thing called the Australian Leadership Project. And we interviewed 2,500 people on the qualities of Australian leadership. We came up with 3 attributes of the Australian leader And the first one is egalitarianism. We're the only country in the world where you talk to the cleaner with the same respect as you talk to the chairman. Self-effacing humour. You and I laugh at ourselves. And then third, no bullshit plain speaking. Now, if we think of those three qualities, I reckon at least 80 to 90%, maybe even 100% of your viewers have got those attributes. At the end of the project, Carol, we were still bewildered as to the negativity. And my eureka moment came at the Global Integrity Summit in 2017, where after 3 days of unending, the world is getting worse, I changed my final speech on the final panel to the case for optimism. And it was electric. And Helen Clark, the former New Zealand Prime Minister, said, turn that into a book, Victor, and I will endorse it. And I did, and she did. And that eureka moment, Carol, was it wasn't the problem of leadership, it's the fog of pessimism. And if I can urge, I had an audience with the Dalai Lama 12 weeks ago now, and he was talking about grandparents and parents. The most important thing you can do is to be a beacon of optimism for your kids, for your grandkids, for all of those around you. And that's why our symbolism, we have that question, what makes you optimistic? And our beacon is a lighthouse early in the morning, Carol.
Wow, that's a fantastic stuff. When you were talking, saying, Australians are more optimistic, I had this thought in my mind, she'll be right, mate. That's like a real typical Aussie saying, and that's just saying everything's going to be fine.
Well, it goes beyond that, Carol, because she'll be right, mate, is the workman or workwoman saying to the boss, leave me to it, trust me, I'll get it done. And I had a really interesting episode. I was doing some work for an American executive. And in the middle of the meeting, for some reason, he just lost it. And he said, the problem with you Australians is your she'll be right attitude. And I looked at him and I said to him, look, you are much more of an expert on international culture than me, but you totally misunderstand the Australian. She'll be right, mate, is the self-reliant, resilient Aussie saying, we'll get it done. And it's interesting that misunderstanding and mistaking it for a manana. And that's why Australians, if you look at it over the centuries, Australians have been so innovative.
So what does make a person optimistic?
It's really variable. We've interviewed 20,000 people now, Carol. We've interviewed presidents, prime ministers. I've interviewed women digging ditches in India. And it's incredibly variable. It generally comes from the heart. For a lot of people, it comes from a faith in God or a faith in humanity or a faith in science. For most people, a big part of optimism is life experience. That knowledge that no matter what goes wrong in the day, the sun still rises in the morning. And then the other one is mindset. It's incredibly variable. You can still be an optimist and have that worry. And grief too. The thing about an optimist is that they have the same grief that everyone else does. But the optimist mindset says it'll work out in the end. I will start again tomorrow morning, or I'll start again next week.
So is optimism the way to a healthy old age?
Oh, that is a great question, Carol. There was a fantastic study that came out of the American military, Boston University and Harvard University. It was published 4 years ago. Big study over decades, tens of thousands of people. And they looked at healthy longevity, living to 85 in good physical and mental health. And they expected it to be wealth or income, genetics or geography, but they were confounded. The result was the trait most associated with healthy longevity is optimism. As we said earlier, a 90-year-old can say my best years are still ahead of me. And the pessimist can say life's not worth living. So it's very closely associated. And the research now is quite profound from universities all around the world that optimism is the key trait associated with healthy longevity. And if you can foster your own optimism and foster the optimism in your partner and your kids, grandkids, and those who work with you, life will be a lot better for everyone.
Thanks for watching our TV show. Be sure to hit subscribe and then you'll never miss an episode. Jump on Facebook, join our group, get in on the fun, fitness, wellness and inspiration. I'm Carol, over 50, so what?